Hello, my patriots. Welcome to another day of government. Today, we're going to be talking about the articles of the Constitution. We won't be talking about all of them. I'm going to tell you about all of them, but then we're going to dive into 4 of the 7. So, why don't we get started? Make sure if you need to have your notes with you so that you can follow along and write things down, you have them printed. Just pause the video for a second. Okay. So remember, there's 3 parts to the Constitution. There's the preamble, which is just a statement saying here's what our goal is as a country and a government. Then there's the articles, like I told you before, it's the meat and potatoes of the Constitution. This is where we're going to see how the government at the national level is set up and how states can be working together. And then the amendments which were made after this was ratified. So the first 3 articles are about the 3 branches at the national level. We're going to talk about those 3 articles today. Article 4, talking about how states relate to each other. We're not going to talk about that till chapter 4, but we are going to talk about the 5th article today, how to amend the Constitution. Supremacy Clause, that's just a statement that says if there's ever a fight between state and national government, the national government wins. We're going to talk more about that when we talk about Article 4. And the Ratification Clause, where you don't really need to know much about it. It's just, hey, we're done, we're ratifying, let's do this. All right, so Article 1 is about the legislative branch. So at the national level, we call this Congress. Other countries call it different things. You know, the UK calls theirs Parliament. The Iran calls theirs the Majlis. It's just other countries call theirs different things, but we call ours Congress. But they all are legislative branches, and the job of any legislative branch is to make the laws. They make laws. They have in the Constitution 2 express powers that are directly stated. They are stated word for word about what they're allowed to do besides make laws. In Article 1, Section 8, it gives them a list specifically what they can do because they didn't want them to become too powerful. The more structured something is and the more regulations and rules there are to follow, the less power a group can have. However, the 18th clause of Article 1, Section 8 says that they get what's known as the elastic clause or the necessary and proper clause, which basically says if they feel like they should be doing something, they can. So it really kind of gave them a lot of power because they can pretty much stretch it however they want to do. Next is the executive branch. This is Article 2. We call our leader of the executive branch the president. Other countries call them prime ministers, or they might call them premiers. We call ours the president. And any executive branch in any country, their job is to enforce the laws. Most of the powers are vague of what the president can do, but they do give some specifics in Article 2, Sections 2 and 3. And I'm sure you've probably heard of some you might not have. Obviously, the one that most people have heard of is their commander-in-chief. The government, when they wrote, the framers, when they wrote this, wanted to make sure that a citizen was in charge of the military, so we didn't have like a military dictatorship. So that's why the president, they can't be a part of the military. They have to be a citizen. And then they get to be commander-in-chief. They get to appoint cabinet members. They can pardon people, which, is a pretty controversial topic. We'll talk more about when we get to Unit 3, when we talk about the president more. They can make treaties with other countries, appoint ambassadors to other countries. Every year they give the State of the Union. I'm sure you've seen that on TV before where the president talks and half of Congress stands up and half sits down when it's an idea that's one-sided. They can call Congress into special session anytime they want. They meet with heads of countries, but their number one job is to faithfully execute the law, which means to enforce the law. Next is the judicial branch. That's Article 3. This is there's a national judiciary. It's not just the Supreme Court, but that's the highest court in the land, and they interpret the laws. We actually have a 2-court system. We have federal and state courts because there are federal and state laws. If you bust someone's mailbox, that's a federal crime. If you cross state lines and rob from somebody, that's a federal crime. If you break the speed limit, that's a state crime. So you go to a state court. Most court cases that you go to would be at the state level. But what does the federal government have jurisdiction over? Meaning like what they get to cover and what they actually interpret laws at. They're interpreting United States laws, treaties with foreign nations, and anything to do with the U.S. Constitution. I keep scrolling the wrong way, sorry. All right, now we're going to talk about Article 5, how to amend the Constitution. Remember, there are 27 amendments. How do you get to make an amendment? The first way to make an amendment is you have to propose it. And this is done at the national level. So at the national level, they have two choices when proposing an amendment. They could either, to get it past this level, step one, they could either have a 2/3 vote approving it in each House of Congress. It has to be separately. It can't be like an average of the two. Or they can have a national convention called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of the states. We've only used the first choice. It's super efficient. It's a lot easier. Could they use the second choice? Absolutely. Have they never? They've never used it. So it's just a lot more efficient to do it that way. So let's say it gets past Congress. Let's say it goes to the next level. What happens? This is, sorry, I keep scrolling the wrong way. Step 2, they ratify or approve the amendment, and that means it's going to go to the states. So after Congress proposes the amendment and they pass it with 2/3 of vote, they send it to the state legislatures, and 3/4 of those state legislatures have to approve it, or 3/4 of state conventions have to approve it. We've used the state convention once to pass the 21st Amendment, but it's just a lot more efficient and convenient to do the state legislature since they're already convening. So, like, if this got sent to Illinois, they'd send it to Springfield, and our General Assembly, which is our state legislature, would have to approve it. And 34 or 3/4 of the 50 states, that means 38 of the 50 states would have to approve it in order to become an amendment. So, obviously, this is you have to have super majorities at each level. A 2/3 vote is a super majority, a 3/4 vote is a super majority, versus just a simple like over 50% majority. So that just means it's harder to pass. And they did that on purpose because they didn't want major changes to the Constitution unless it was something that was a major consensus that people felt that was necessary. There are also informal changes to the Constitution. The way that it can be done at the branches. And what that means is they do stuff that it has to do with the Constitution, but isn't in the Constitution as a formal amendment. So Congress can do that by passing laws. When they passed Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, that's not an amendment to the Constitution. It's just a law that they created. How can they? Through the president can make executive agreements with other nations or treaties. So there's nothing in the Constitution, there's not an amendment that says the president can't do this. So he can just kind of work around what he's told he can do by making these things called executive agreements, which is kind of like a treaty, but Congress doesn't approve it. And then how do they do that judicially? Well, anytime the Supreme Court makes a decision that changes an old rule, they're setting a new precedent. This is known as judicial activism. A great example would be with one of the most controversial court cases of all time, Roe versus Wade, which found that abortion is constitutional. That is an example of something where it was considered illegal before, and now because the court made that decision, it set that new precedent and new laws throughout the country where women could get abortions within the first trimester. So it doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution anything about abortions, but it's their interpretation of it where they kind of made that informal change. All right, so that's it right now. Next, you are going to do the worksheet that accompanies this so that you guys can see how their relationship works and what it's like to make an amendment. I will talk to you later. Bye.